What separates a good anime from a great anime? Why do some animes stick with us long after we've watched it? Welcome to The Workshop.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Kris.
We're two friends from high school and now aspiring writers. And in this podcast, we discuss and deconstruct storytelling elements in some of our favorite animes.
So, we're back, and today in The Workshop, we are bringing it back to the 90s, which is an iconic decade for anime, in my humble opinion. So, in particular, we'll be discussing the beloved genre-bending, action-adventure, jazzy, space western Cowboy Bebop. We were really excited to watch it. So this anime first came out in 1998, written and animated by the staff at Sunrise Animation Studio. More than 20 years later, Cowboy Bebop continues to have a profound and lasting legacy on the anime industry and its fans.
I believe you chose this one for your sci-fi recommendation in the last episode.
I did.
Yes. Teaser. All right.
Yeah.
So here's a summary. The year is 2071. Humanity has colonized most of the other planets in the solar system. So right away, we meet our protagonists who are heavily involved in a world of space criminals, bounty hunting, and senseless violence. And who work and live from the spaceship Bebop, chasing bad guys and finding some purpose for themselves in the process of doing that. The gang accrues new members along the way and often dive headfirst into dangerous mishaps while running from, and in some cases towards, dark, distant pasts.
Ooh. Spicy.
That's our default reaction.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Spicy. All right, shall we jump in? Overall impressions?
Yes, we shall. I will start with my overall impressions today. So right away, I want to talk about animation direction. I know we usually spend a lot of focus on writing, but one of the things that caught my eye, funnily enough, was, I think, the animation direction. I'm not very familiar with some of the age-old classics, but when I started watching episode 1, I was like, whoever directed this is genius.
You actually sent me a text, I think, the day you started watching it, and you were like, I can't believe this is the best show I've ever watched.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, chill.
That was like episode 1.
Yeah.
Little did I know there were many more to come. 25 episodes. It's pretty long. Yeah, I just really admire how it's animated with a lot of seriousness, almost like it was like a live action film. You know, I feel like with animation, sometimes people think that they can get away with taking shortcuts. I don't know. I was really impressed by how fluid the characters' movements were. Cutscenes were very expertly placed and timed. Lots of camera angles. I really like that. There's almost like a muted coloration going on, but I don't know if that's just a stylistic choice or if that was a 90s thing. Yeah, and also a lot of experimentation with lighting. I was just really impressed. And I think these are all small things, but I think any, movie fanatic will agree with me when I say all of these elements combine together to do its own sort of storytelling, right? Visual storytelling. So, and like the voice acting too. I watched the Japanese version. I don't know if you did. Okay.
I watched half and half.
Yeah, okay. If you are like talking and there's a camera close-up, you hear the voices very distinctly and clearly. And then when they have a back shot from a distance, the voices go in from a distance. I don't know. I thought that was really cool. Like, I was like, replay this part, because I was just really, really impressed. The other thing I was super, super impressed with is the space genre. Like,
oh yeah. Oof.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. I don't know why. I think there's part of the appeal with having a story set in space is that you have to portray space travel as flashy and easy are the two main things, because it allows people to like bypass the technical difficulties and intricacies of space travel. Like, guys, space travel is not easy, okay? Even like studying space, it ain't easy. It's called rocket science for a reason.
Yeah.
So like there's no way that some of these things happen in real life or can happen or are possible. But that's the nice thing about space adventure, is that you make it flashy, you make it exciting, and you make it so that it's kind of believable too. It's like, oh my gosh, engine failure, oh no, in that sense it's kind of realistic still. So you still get all of the flashiness and the fun without having to like worry about technical difficulties, and you also get the risk of it, because space travel is so risky, right? Like as soon as you get a hole in your spaceship, everything is sucked into the vacuum. That was really fun. Like, I just had a lot of fun watching this. I was super impressed, and I was just super happy watching it. I don't know.
I got so derailed by your like Star Wars analogy, because I actually, while I was watching it, never thought of Star Wars once while I was watching it. Which surprises me now, because like you said, like it's Star Wars, right? Like it's literally Star Wars. But for some reason, like I think this doesn't feel like any other space action adventure out there, or at least in popular media. It just really sets itself apart in its atmosphere and in its setting, and I think just a lot of that has to do obviously with the storytelling and the style of it, but also just with the soundtrack. Like jazz space western, like what was going through their heads? Like on paper it sounds so crazy and impossible, but for me it's like the definition of like the rule of cool. It's just so cool to watch. But okay, so what amazed me about this show is that I went in with really high expectations and I still wasn't disappointed. Which is crazy. Like I went in with like the highest expectations ever, because everyone talks about how this is one of the most iconic, one of the most important anime ever made. And I think while I was watching it, I had a lot of reflection about how this show feels so different and so far removed from what we currently associate with like popular anime. So it really feels like, they made the show and then no one was really able to capture this vibe in the same way. And no one was able to really, it's almost that like lightning in a bottle thing, where I'm sure like other anime has tried to, go for that like, ooh, cool, jazzy action aesthetic. But the quality of the storytelling, and maybe I shouldn't say the quality, but you know what? I am going to say the quality. The quality of the storytelling, I think, doesn't really hit the same. And so I think that there is something that's really special about about what they were able to accomplish with this show. And then what I really liked, obviously, first and foremost, is just the way that it weaves in and out of these different genres and in and out of these sci-fi tropes and like detective, crime, noir tropes. And then again, it just really leans into the tropes instead of trying to subvert them. And I think the reason that works well for this show is because they make up for it in their characters and in their world building. Like everything else in the show feels so unique that they can lean into these tropes and make them feel fresh, if that makes sense. And then the last thing is just the anthology style of the show is like, if you guys listen to this podcast, I'm very partial to this type of storytelling. I love the feeling of every episode being its own contained adventure. I think that's what makes a world feel, if your world building is good, that's what makes a world feel really lived in and really vibrant, because every episode is able to focus on this really like specific facet of society, or like a really interesting, unique niche subculture. So they're really able to kind of flex and show like, oh, look at how we've imagined this space society to exist, and look at all these like cool subcultures or things that would arise if this technology were possible. So yeah, the world building just feels so holistic, and I think for me this show just feels so timeless. Like I thought that I would go into the show and be like, oh my God, like I can feel how 90s this is. But I never really felt like that. Like obviously it's an old show and like you can tell that it's old, but something about it never feels outdated. Just because it's so like stylish and it's so fun to watch, and it has these moments of genre, of character reflection, of comedy and action and melancholy, and it really has everything that makes a piece of science fiction media really great, which to me is like creative world building and tech that is really well integrated into society. And on top of that, the cherry on top, I think, is just that it has characters that you really want to root for. So it's just so fantastic, and I'm really glad that I can now participate in Cowboy Bebop discourse. I feel very accomplished.
Were saying like the writers and artists flex, like they really do. You can see how they treat the whole thing as an experiment. Like it really feels like one day they finished an episode and they were like, so what should we do next?
What to do next, guys?
Like they sat down and they were like, I kind of want to try redoing this Western movie in the next episode. Like, what do you think? Yeah. And then you know what? Like sometimes they come out with great episodes, and sometimes they come out with episodes that are a little bit lackluster, but because it's still like true to the main storyline, true to the atmosphere that was originally established by the series, it doesn't seem too out of place. But it's really, like, you can really tell that the creators had fun with it. I don't know. I agree.
Like, you can tell that this was such a passion project, and like maybe we can kind of segue into talking about the cultural impact of the show.
Definitely, yes.
Because I feel like it's hard to talk about the show without talking about its legacy. With a show like this, they could have easily just like dragged it out if they wanted to. Like, it was popular when it came out. Like, people liked it, and if they wanted to make this like multiple seasons or like 100 episodes long, they totally could have, and people totally would have watched. But the fact that they were like, no, we have a story to tell, this is it, and now we're done telling it, and you know, we care about the integrity of the show enough to just say, hey, it's 26 episodes, that's it. I think that it also contributes to why people remember it as this like great piece of media, because they didn't try to like milk it. They didn't try to make it a cash cow. Like, everyone in there like really was aligned on the vision of the show, it seems like, at least, and they were able to accomplish that.
For me, I think one of the reasons why it had such a great, like, left behind such a great legacy is because I want to say it's because it's almost a more mature series while also preserving that shonen, you know, for a younger audience kind of vibe to it. I think that they deal with a lot of mature themes, but not in any way where it's like, okay, this has become the center of, you know, of attention, the central theme to this show, because the central themes to the show are pretty universal. You know, it's about discovering your past and how you react to it. It's about friendship, right? It's so pretty PG-13 themes, but they portray it in a way that's very accessible and very liked by older audiences as well. So it's like, you know, you appreciate the musicality, and you appreciate that people, like, that these characters go through real pain, real suffering, not just like physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. And they're also more mature characters in and of themselves. I know we have characters like Ed and Ein that kind of serve their role as like more comedic relief characters, but characters like Spike and Faye and Jet, like, these people have like seen things, you know. So even though at its heart it's very heartwarming and very like heartwarming is I think the pinnacle adjective I would use.
I'm reading this article from The Atlantic about like sort of the legacy of the show, and I think, you know, they said like its warmth and romanticism doesn't feel cheesy or cliched. Its violence is still mildly shocking for a cartoon. It's perfectly paced, and its sense of adventure still feels new and exhilarating. And I think it's like all of those elements that it's kind of like there's something in the show for everyone.
And the fact that they were able to situate it in like a sci-fi world, because it's so easy to just go sci-fi, guns, pew pew,
Boom, boom,
spaceship.
boom, boom.
And the whole time they were like, yeah, we have all of those. You know what we also have? Great characters, mature themes, musicality.
This show would be nothing if they were like, well, we're not going to write interesting characters. Like,
Exactly.
even though you might look at Faye or Jet or Spike and be like, it's like they're tropey, like they're clearly going for this kind of character. It almost like doesn't really matter because they're able to kind of craft their character arc or their backstory in a way that like you just want to root for them, like you kind of care about them. And the other thing is that they are making like a live action Cowboy Bebop.
Oh,
Hollywood is. So I'm curious to see how they do that. I think that most cases I say live action's kind of
Same.
mostly miss, but for something like this I can see it being good, maybe.
Oh, I'm excited.
Is that everything?
Let's
Shall we jump
move
into the
on
writing?
So we're gonna analyze each character. We're gonna talk about each character, it one by one in depth. And we've chosen a few episodes to hone in on. So obviously we gotta talk about our homeboy,
Spike Spiegel.
So, as mentioned, Spike is the protag main character. He's kind of like the Han Solo type. He's adventurous, charming, morally great.
Morally great. When did that turn into a meme?
Workshop
I don't know.
Name. Rogue-esque, vigilante, street smart, the kind that knows his way around.
Ooh.
We get an arrogant vibe from him, but I think that it's kind of nice because we get the sense that he's powerful and smart enough to not die. So whenever he comes on screen, I don't know, me as an audience, I get kind of confidence and like I can relax a little bit from my stress knowing that he has some main character armor. Obviously not enough if you've watched this.
Spoilers.
Okay, spoiler alert. Obviously, we should have done that earlier. But at least for the vast majority, you get some confidence whenever you see Spike on the screen. So the first episode we want to talk about is episode 5, which is where we first get a taste of his backstory. It's the first time that we see Spike not acting out because of money. That's kind of when you know that something's up, right? What'd you think about episode 5?
It's interesting because, like, up until that point, again, the show is kind of doing this, like, anthology style too. And especially in the beginning, I feel like a lot of it was just establishing, these are our characters. This is what this show is about. Like, Spike and his friend Jet are just, like, they're just bounty hunters. And they're literally, Spike and his friend Jet are, like, they're just trying to, like, make money in this, like, very lawless world. It kind of feels like he's not a character that really takes himself too seriously until we sort of get to this episode 5 mark, and it really feels like that's like the first tease that we get, that like, oh, Spike kind of has a past that he's trying to run away from. You kind of get this like introduction into the main villain. He is like the main villain, right? Yeah. And he, honestly, guys, like, he looks like he's like a Final Fantasy, like Kingdom Hearts.
I said that too in my notes.
Like, he literally looks like he doesn't belong in this show.
I called him a Bishonen vampire.
There was like one scene in particular that I like wrote down because it was so like beautiful and like visually interesting. And it was kind of like he's sort of fighting Vicious, a man from his past, and they're like fighting in this like dilapidated church, I think it was.
Yeah.
And like there's just this like peaceful, heavenly aspect to this crazy revenge fight. And I really liked, like, it goes into this flashback of Spike's past, and there's almost like this church-like choir, like choral song that's playing. It was just like the vibe was so like visually interesting, and it just made you so curious about like who Spike actually is. It was a great intro episode to his past.
Such a different vibe from the usual sci-fi space adventure vibe. It's more like gothic, I think that's the best word to describe it, like
Yeah.
gothic. So they were definitely like, let's just try it, you know? I have some things to say about Vicious as a villain, that'll hold off for
Yeah.
now, but I don't know. For me, I didn't think he was a great villain. I don't know if you have the same opinion, but you're right in saying that when I watched this episode, I was intrigued, at least, because it was so different from what we're used to getting for the first few episodes, that I was like, huh. And then I want to talk about the flashback scene at the very end, which is, I think, also where the scene you were talking about comes from. But I thought it was really beautiful, because it was what a flashback montage should be like, in my opinion, where it's like, flashbacks don't always have to make sense, you know, especially to the viewer, because the nature of a flashback is like, all of a sudden you just get a flash of all of these memories that pertain to the specific event that you're going through, or that maybe are like highly traumatic in some type of way. So I thought they executed the flashback really well, because it made me really intrigued as to what his backstory actually was, but it also prolonged the mystery by being like, okay, hold off, we're not going to tell you anything that makes sense yet. Honestly, for a lot of the series, I was like, I literally don't understand anything about Spike's backstory, because they feed it to you in ways that are like, okay,
So
here's a little bit,
confusing.
but it doesn't make sense yet. And here's another
Which is
part,
probably
but
intentional.
also that doesn't make sense yet. Exactly. Very intentional, most likely.
They probably wanted Vicious and like that whole whatever it was crime syndicate that Spike comes from to feel so different than Spike and the crew and the world that we've been introduced to. Like, it's supposed to feel almost like Disney villain-esque evil, because I don't know, this is just me guessing. Like, they could have, like, this could totally not be true, it's conjecture, but I think the contrast of that and like the sort of like over the top ridiculousness of this crime syndicate kind of just like makes the world seem like, or it makes that whole like group of people seem like, you know what, it makes sense that like Spike would want to fake his death and get out of this place. Like they're like, it's so like comically ridiculous.
People can twist ridiculous settings into a way where the storytelling makes it worth it. Like, I think that even though the setting is ridiculous, you can make it good. It felt like it was like, this is Spike's backstory. We're just gonna keep going with the backstory. And by the end of the series, it was like, we're gonna take away every single other character that was meaningful to Spike and just have Spike finish off the Spike backstory. Do you know what I mean? So it felt like it was like, all right, here's the Spike story, and we're never gonna meet the main story back head on. So let's talk about episode 12 and 13.
Honestly, his whole character confused me. I was like, okay, so he's from Spike's past. Okay. I honestly didn't quite understand why or how or like what this really means for Spike, but I still liked the episode for the vibe.
Like, I liked it for the vibes.
I really liked just like his whole character interaction with Faye. It was just so atmospheric.
Whenever I watch any episode centered around Spike's backstory, there is such a dramatic shift in tone. Like, there is so much violence that happens in episodes where Spike has to deal with his past. It's so dark. The coloration of the entire episode goes black. It's very gritty and raw. And I think that is very intentional. Like, they have episodes where it's very lighthearted, very fun. There are even episodes that are very interesting and more dark that are a different type of dark than Spike-centered episodes. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, that was what was established for me. It was the establishment that, okay, like, this is a side of the story that we're going to look more into, but that's going to bring out a lot of pain, a lot of senseless violence.
Yeah, a lot of senseless violence.
And then there was also episode 19.
I think Spike is like in his little ship or whatever, and he's like in a bit of like a space shootout type thing. And something happens to his ship, or like, I can't remember exactly the details of it, but I think it really stood out to me because there's this like tiny moment where he's kind of communicating with Jet, who's on the main ship. And Spike is just like, he kind of sees like the hopelessness of the situation. Something's happening to his ship. There's no way that he can get out of this. And he almost has this like readiness to die. And the moment is literally like, it's like 10 seconds, and then 2 seconds later, like Doohan, who is like, I don't know, like a mechanic, or that we met earlier in the episode, kind of is able to rescue him. But there was like something about that moment where I was like,
oh my gosh,
why is he so ready to die? Like, oh my god. Yeah, it was just like, the show is full of all of these like tiny character moments that are so quick or so subtle, but they just feel really poignant, and sometimes you like forget about them in the grand scheme of the action-filled episode.
We'll also talk about the finale, obviously. As mentioned before, it's very Spike-centered.
It's all Spike.
Yeah, it is. I didn't know how I felt about their decision to strip away all of the other characters and kind of have Spike be like this one-man show facing his past.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'm coming to terms with it.
Me too. I have the exact same feeling as you.
Because it's like, part of me is like, why? Like, I like the other
Why would
people,
you do this?
You know? Yeah, like, part of me is like, you know, isn't anime all about friendship and family? You know? But part of me is also like, I see where the stress and emphasis in this show is put on,
yeah,
you know, fight your monsters. And sometimes you will find yourselves in situations where realistically you might die alone, you know? Like, this is reality. And so you have to fight your own monsters. And so I see where they're coming from. I just wish there was some plot armor to help
for once in our life.
But yeah, what'd you think?
I had the exact same thought process as you. When I first watched it, I was like, oh, you're kidding me. Like, it's literally like, first of all, the ending is like Spike finally confronting his past. And he has this like a huge, big, like anime fight with Vicious. It's like the culmination of his whole character. But for me, the part that I was like, that hurt me a lot about the show or about the finale was actually the moment, the interaction between him and Faye. Faye kind of knows that Spike is about to maybe go to his death and basically tells him like, don't go, you know, like
so out of character.
Yeah, and it's
up until
so
this point
out of character for her to be explicitly vulnerable, and especially with Spike, because the whole show, her and Spike are just not at each other's throats, but like it almost always feels like they're having a battle of apathy. Like they never want to show each other
like
that
brothers
they
and
care.
sisters.
Exactly. Like family. They never want to show that they care about each other or about anything. And so for her to say like, don't go to your death, essentially because this is my family now, you can kind of tell that like there is this found family element there that feels like has been building, and to kind of have him go and just ignore that and kind of entirely felt a little bit like a betrayal of the character that I thought was developing for Spike. So after ruminating on it in my anger for a few days, I realized, you know what? It's a preference. I had expectations for how I wanted Spike to turn out, but you know what? The path that they have chosen is valid. It's a valid storytelling decision, and they were clearly going for a vibe, and they wanted to have that epic shootout where the man confronts his past. That's fine. Am I happy about it? Not really, but I'm not going to count it as a criticism against the quality of the story.
I agree. And extending off of that, this finale really did feel like a shattering of the illusion. Being like, hey, like, you know, we've had a lot of adventures together up until here, but this is reality, you know? And I think the scene for me that hit home, it's such an insignificant scene, but it's when Faye is at the airport and she turns around and sees Alfred from Big Shot, which is the TV show that they were constantly following throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
And boom, like shattering of the illusion.
Yeah.
No more of this adventuresque, you know, building a family. We're safe in the Bebop spaceship, you know?
Yeah.
This is reality. People are poor. People get unemployed, you know? People die. And so that was kind of for me like the setup of this tone where it's like, okay, like Spike feels this calling towards his past that he has to deal with, and realistically it's not going to be pretty. Realistically, he's not going to have his friends by his side, and he's not going to win everything. Exactly. Except for that part where he like enters the building and like goes up to the top floor while defeating all these guys.
I was like, that's plot armor, but we're just gonna ignore that. We're just gonna ignore that for now.
I was like, that's okay too. You know what? I was okay with it.
Yeah. I also think like it was almost like a wake-up call for me, at least, or just in general with the contrast between Spike and Faye, where Faye has had her episode
I love talking about this.
where she realizes that, you know, she has no past to go back to. She only has the future.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of understand her frustration with Spike, where you have Spike constantly looking backwards and Faye finally being able to move forward, but then sort of seeing Spike not choose to move forward as well. I think that was also what makes that exchange quite heartbreaking.
With that being said, anything else to say about Spike?
No, that's it. Yeah, let's go on
to
Best Girl.
With that being said, let's go on to Best Girl. I love Faye. I think she is up there with my favorite characters. I don't have one yet, but I think she's up there.
She hasn't decided.
I love the way that this series treats new characters and how they introduce them, especially main cast characters, because they're always introduced in a way that is almost antagonistic to the protags, because it's never like, let's help each other right away. Do you know what I mean? It's always like, oh my gosh, screw you, you dingbat, you're getting in my way, you know? Or they're fully antagonistic upon first mention or upon when you first meet them. And the thing I love about Faye is that she almost like preserves that antagonism towards Jed and towards Spike the whole series, but she sticks around because she's like, you know, you can tell she's kind of like, I don't know, like I kind of like these guys, they feed me,
right?
Like, but she has so many of her own flaws, and she's always running away from home too, right? Like the big sister, like she's out gambling one day and the next
she'll just like fully leave the ship and then come back, and no one will really say anything.
The dudes will be like, really, so where'd she go today? And the other guy's like, I don't know, she probably like stole something, she's never coming back.
Or like, why is she on Mars? Like, it's like all this like random stuff, they never know where she is.
But her first substantive episode is episode 15, and this is the one where they really take a deep dive into her past, talk about how she was cryogenically preserved for 54 years.
And it was like, when they really fully went into her past, I was like, my jaw like dropped. And I think it's such a great use of a sci-fi concept. She was in a cryogenic sleep for 54 years, so she's actually not from this generation or this world. Basically, technology has, you know, advanced to this, like, to lengths that she never imagined when she was younger. And I think that's such a good device to use to explain like why she has no one and why she has like no past, like no family, no friends, because, you know, she's from a completely different era. And I think the fact that this is episode 15, it's like you're basically like more than halfway through the show, because there's only 26 episodes. But at this point, it's like you are recontextualizing everything you know about Faye's character in your mind as a viewer. Because up until this point, you're just like, oh, she's, you know, she's just your typical feisty gal who's like, you know, knows how to shoot a gun and take care of herself, which I appreciated on its own. But now you kind of see this episode, and you kind of see that she used to have this like this innocence to her, and this like this, I don't know, there was like something that was a lot more vulnerable about her, and you can kind of see that, oh, her circumstances are so bleak and so crazy, and that's kind of why she's turned out like this, because she's had to in order to survive, not only physically but like emotionally.
I like the fact that because Faye doesn't necessarily have a past that she recalls, she's just able to make stories up about her past. I like that about her because it shows her craftiness, but it also shows a kind of defense mechanism that people put up, right? They lie. They lie about themselves. I would say that she's, what do you call when someone just a compulsive liar, right?
Yeah.
I would think that she's just a compulsive liar. And there's this one part that I was really intrigued by. It's when the doctor came after them towards the end of the episode, and he kind of just tells her like, you know, a lot of people wonder who they really are, where they're from, where they'll go. It's something that everybody asks themselves once. However, puberty is the only time you worry about that kind of stuff, you know? Like, he was basically trying to say, like, everybody does it, but, you know, grow the heck up, right?
Right, yeah.
If you're, like, actually mature, if you're actually an adult, you wouldn't think such thoughts after a certain age, right? There is always that tension between growing up and moving on for everybody, right? For all the characters in this show, and retaining that child in you and looking and wanting to look back, especially for Faye, because she essentially had a childhood and then she grew up. She had no in between or state of transition or coming of age. And so I think it's very appropriate that she gets another episode later on called Speak Like a Child, because it's like she wants so much to put up this front of being an adult. She wants to move on, but she just can't.
And Speak Like a Child, if we're going to talk about it now,
Episode 18?
Yeah. Episode 18, for some reason,
this your favorite?
It's like my favorite episode. I don't know why. like I said, Faye is my favorite character in the show, but also because it's unexpected. It just feels like your average Cowboy Bebop episode, and then in the end there's a bit of this gut punch. So basically what happens is I think Jet and Spike they're on Earth for some reason, or they end up on Earth, and they have like a VHS tape or something. But then they spend the whole episode trying to watch the tape. Like, there's a bunch of issues with it. And then they finally get back to the Bebop, to the ship. They put the tape into their whatever, and they start watching it, and you realize that it's kind of like this time capsule, like, video that Faye recorded when she was a kid. And you can so clearly see the like innocence in her that kind of doesn't exist anymore, or that she has completely pushed away to try and survive in this world. And then the episode just ends. It just ends with her seeing the clip and the whole crew watching it. And I think it's just a perfect example of how this show is able to tell so much story and just say so much about their characters in such small and nuanced ways. Like, for me, it was just like so like tragic, but also is just like really clever.
You have Faye running away this entire episode, you know? She's literally not on the ship at all until the very end, right?
Yeah.
She's out gambling, right? But that's really like, you can really see that's her way of running away. And what you said about the time capsule that they watch at the end, the videotape, I like almost cried.
I think I did shed a tear. I was like, oh my gosh.
And because it's like, because it's a persona of her that is so distantly removed and there's so little of that person left in her, that it almost seems like an entirely different person. And because of that fact, that another person, it feels like it's another person besides herself who's encouraging her and spurring her on. And that exacerbates the feeling of encouragement so much, and of like it heightens the emotions of that scene so much, because it's like Faye really, you know that Faye really needs that, you know? And there's nobody on the ship that's going to give her that. Spike's not, Jet's not, Ed isn't, Em can't speak. There's nobody that's going
I'm
to...
a dog. Let's clarify.
There's nobody that's going to come outright and say, hey, girl, you got this, you know? Like, things might seem crap right now, but you got this, and I'm here for you. I'm rooting for you.
And she's never going to seek that out for herself because of her own...
Yes!
Yeah. So episode 24.
Great episode. Mm-hmm.
Episode 24, Hard Luck Woman. We get to hang out with Faye and Ed. I think it's by the end of this episode where she realizes... Is it this episode? She goes back to her house.
She goes back to her house. Yeah.
Yeah, and finds that it doesn't exist anymore. And it's kind of like this moment for her of like final, actual, tangible realization, like that she really has nothing to return to. And there was something that's really like introspective or like reflective about this episode. Like you can really feel Faye's sense of yearning in general throughout the show, but I think especially in this episode. She's like despite her cold exterior, she's always really just looking for like just some sense of belonging.
But I think that for her, it must have been such a relief to finally just know, right? She spent this whole time not knowing, and sometimes that can be a greater curse than actually knowing and having it be a sad story, a sad backstory. For me, this episode in terms of Faye was all about belonging, as you said. I think that the show explores past a lot, but also belonging, because the reason why people want to find out about their past is because they feel like they can belong to it, right? So there's this moment where Faye's talking to Ed, actually, and this is also the episode where Ed finds out who her dad is and where he is. And she tells Ed, like, leave, right? Like, you have somebody waiting for you. You have somewhere where you belong. And so you can just go back there, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm chasing for too. Like, I'm chasing for a past to belong to. And you kind of get this this feeling of the Bebop being like a place for people who don't belong anywhere. And so you belong to the Bebop. And it's frustrating for you as a viewer because you want to just grab them and say, you belong here, like you belong on the Bebop. But they are so persistent and selfish and in a character flaw way, and selfish and arrogant, that they think, I need to seek this out for myself. I need to have the great story. I need to go back to my past and reconcile, you know, and people chase things all the time, right? Yeah. Forever. They keep chasing it until they find it. And sometimes it's not what they expected, what they hoped, but it's the certainty, at least, of knowing. And that provides some comfort, I think.
We love her.
Hold her in our palms. Protect.
Is that who we're adopting this episode?
Yes.
I really wanted to adopt Ein, the corgi. Oh, but I feel like he's fine by himself. Like I
think he's the most like independent character out of all of them. He doesn't need our help.
Yeah, he doesn't need our help. All right, cool. Let's talk about
Jet. Mama Jet.
Mama Jet.
Mama Jet.
He's the one that like cooks and cleans.
He cooks for everyone. He looks after everyone. He gardens his bonsai trees, you know.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
We love him.
But does he have trauma? Oh boy, oh yes.
Oh boy, does he have trauma.
So we start with episode 10, Ganymed Elegy. This is the episode where we look into his past. He used to be a cop, right? So he has this, that's kind of the story's way of giving him, of justifying his strong sense of justice and of order, right? Because that's his background. That's where he comes from. I thought this, because this episode was relatively early on, episode 10, and so I really liked how they started to use symbolism for him. I think that the use of the broken stopwatch in this episode to signify, you know, for Jet, time has kind of stopped moving. Again, revisiting the theme of somebody's past. Jet's always, Spike's past is always knocking on the door. Faye's always running after her non-existent one. And for Jet, he's still stuck in it. For him, it's like, he's never been able to move on, right? So he finally goes back to where he's come from. And I think it's very good that... Why did I just take so long to
you were like,
up with the adjective good?
Good?
It's great that he reconciles with his past first because because everybody else needs him, you know?
Exactly.
He has all of these kids on his damn ship. He touches base with his, I don't know if it was his past wife. Like, I don't know if they were married.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, but the woman he was involved with, but basically she had left him. For Jet, it's like you get this expectation that he's going to solve it in a very grown-up and adult way. But like, he doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I always find very poignant this theme of adults thinking like they're adults and that they don't have this immaturity inside them. And that's what the feeling that I got from Jet from this episode, because there's this whole facade of sitting at the bar and having a quiet conversation and coming to terms through conversation what happened in the past. But then the whole episode is like this wild car chase scene of him like going after her and finding out that her boyfriend's a criminal, and it's so dramatic. And it's like, you didn't have to do that, you know, like you didn't have to go back. But by the end of it, I think that it's, you know, all the chaos, all of the action is very cathartic in some way for somebody like Jet. And by the end of it, he uses the stopwatch and throws it away and uses that as a symbolic reference to, all right, time to move on. You know, I've reconciled. Yeah. Even though he, you know, Jet does get more backstory episodes later on, it's a little, at least it's a little ribbon tied over one part of his trauma that he's been able to get over.
We do get a sense of maturity on the screen for these characters. Like, it's almost like, when I think of the ship itself, I almost also think of Jet and just how those things are like kind of grounding these characters in something. So yeah, he feels like a very grounded character. But at least we still see that he is deeply flawed, just like any of the other characters. But I think, you know, even those elements, it's just like, it just holds him back from being vulnerable. And every character on that ship has something that holds them back from being vulnerable.
Yes, I agree. And then episode 21, I
Woogie Boogie Feng Shui. I know you said you didn't like this episode.
I just think it's
explain why. I want to hear your thoughts, because I don't really have like strong feelings about it or anything.
I have strong negative feelings about this episode.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have the most notes for this episode.
Really?
Because I start off this episode talking about how I really like so many elements that they weave into the like genre-wise, because you start off with this mysterious email that's sent to you by someone in your past, followed by this mysterious girl who is ambiguous as to whether she is young enough to be my daughter or old enough to be my girlfriend.
Oh God, yeah, let's not go into that yet.
And then you have the search for the Sunstone, you know, this whole journey that you have that is set up for you. Great. Love it. Mwah.
Love that.
And then you have a car chase. You've got people going after you, so you dive into the water. You know, it's action packed. It's got the sci-fi. It's got the mystery. And they finally get to the destination where her father is, and they have like a video call, and they're like, "Oh, love you, bye."
You're right. Yeah.
And to get this emotional, just like drop in the story, I was livid. I was like, all right, done for today.
It's funny because I thought you were gonna, when we were talking about this before we started recording, you're like, I hated this episode, and I was like, oh, I wonder why she doesn't like it. Like, maybe she has beef with like the universal feng shui thing, or like maybe she has beef with like the fact that they were trying to talk romantically about Jet and Meifa.
Right.
They set up all of these things to make it seem like this episode would be kind of an adventure or something, and to just kind of like have it not really culminate into anything interesting
at the end.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing, which I don't know, I think I expected it to, I don't want to say focus on Jet more, but I expected the episode to provide me something new about Jet's character. Not necessarily something like give me something new about his past, but just like show me like what does this contribute to my knowledge and to my relationship with Jet's character as a viewer? Because I feel like whenever we see Spike's past, whenever we see Faye's past, it always makes me rethink what I know about that character, or it kind of progresses them in some way emotionally. But this was just kind of like, Jet was there.
Yeah, I learned nothing new.
I don't know, like, Faye and Spike kept talking about Mayfa as like, oh, we think Mayfa could be, like, good for him or something like that. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, I didn't really understand the point of those comments. So it just kind of felt like that kind of conversation didn't amount to anything. So it just kind of left me feeling a little weird.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's all I had to say about that episode. And
then we move on to Other Best Girl.
Other Best Girl.
We need to like lower our standards for good characters.
Listen, if I like a character, she's best girl. Like, what can I say?
Best Girl Ed.
Yeah.
Let me just off the bat say, sometimes I think that all of their problems could be solved if they just let Ed do it.
Honestly.
But anyways, we meet her for the first time in episode 9. And that's when the interactions in the main Bebop living area become more, you know, lighthearted bickering, interesting conversations. Lively, exactly. That's the word.
Like, it just felt like Ed finally rounded out the dynamic of the show. And even though she might feel like she's more of a background character, I honestly feel like the vibe of the show, or at least the vibe of the scenes where they're on the ship, would feel vastly different without her. And I do feel like sometimes, again, this is not unique to episode 9, but I do feel like sometimes she does kind of just come in on other episodes to just like, Ed, we need you to hack this so that we can move forward to the plot point. But it never feels like forced, because from just what we know about her character, it's just like, yeah, she's super smart. Like, we just accept that. That's been established. That, like, you know, I can accept that. So I do like that she doesn't really have anything like tragic about her. She's just kind of a character who's living her life, is super smart, is super independent, and just there's something very colorful about her and about her personality that I really appreciated, even though we don't linger on her as much.
Moving on to episode 24, which is the episode she shares with Faye, it's telling that when she leaves the Bebop with Ayn and they're walking away in the sunset, you feel lost. Like, you feel like you've lost an integral part of the cast in these two characters, even though they don't do anything the whole time other than make you laugh or, you know, like,
do something fun in the background.
Advance the plot point. That is a good use, I think, of a side character that's not supposed to do much.
Especially in episode 24, we kind of meet this, like, I don't want to say it's an orphanage, but it operates like an orphanage. Like, there's this one, like, nun or something on Earth who takes care of a lot of the street kids, and she kind of describes Ed as a bit of a stray cat. Like, she kind of just came in one day and then left one day. And I think that kind of foreshadows Ed doing the exact same thing with the Bebop. Yeah. Her time with the crew was just a contained adventure. It was just one chapter of her life, and now she's ready to move on. And, like, yeah, I know, like, it was just really sad to see her go. I just really liked her. So.
And realistically, you know that she'll be capable and fine physically.
Yeah,
but also
exactly. She'll be fine.
She's not gonna miss it. Like, when she went back to the orphanage, she didn't even remember who they were, you know? She just knew that it was a place to get food. So you know that she's not going to have any traumatic experience or memory tied to the Bebop other than this is a place where I had fun. It was a place where I was taken care of. Yeah. And at the heart of it, that's what the Bebop was too. It was a place for you to feel like you belonged to that place momentarily. They took care of you. They fed you. You had good times there. And then let's move on, you know?
On to the next. Okay.
Anyways, that was emotional. Okay.
That was emotional and so much longer than I thought it was going to be. So let's go rapid fire through these episodes. The first one that I really liked, and the show, like the episode that I was just like, ooh, I'm like so into this for some reason, is episode 11, Toys in the Attic.
I hated
If I had to pick an episode that I felt like was the most different than any of the other episodes, it would definitely be Toys in the Attic. And I think the reason I liked it so much was because I could exactly see where they were pulling from. When I think about what else was popular in the 90s, there was the X-Files, Twin Peaks, and like all those like supernatural like mystery shows. And like I'm a huge fan of the X-Files. So I felt like I really liked how creepy it was, but also how whimsical it was. It was like a nice tone shift for that one episode. And then right after that we went straight into like Jupiter Jazz, which was like fully about Spike's past. So yeah,
I literally thought it was gonna be so scary, and it turned out to be like this like lobster that Spike had left in the fridge for like a couple of years, and now it's like came back to life. That was so funny. But the thing is, like, sometimes when something is ridiculous, it could go either way, you know? Like, the feng shui episode was so ridiculous. I hated it. This was like, it made you tense up the whole time, and then to reveal like the ridiculous ending, and you're like, huh, that's kind of funny.
That's it. Yeah. Next episode.
You like this episode, right?
I do. I don't know why I have so much.
Episode 23.
I really liked this episode.
Psychological thriller.
Yeah. So this episode is called Brain Scratch, and it's basically, I guess it's kind of a psychological thriller. I almost felt like this episode was really philosophical too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And it kind of goes into like, what would a cult look like in this world of like super advanced technology? And the nature of the cult is like letting go of everything like material, including your own body, and just kind of uploading your consciousness, I don't know, to just like your soul or something like that. But I think first of all, the fact that this episode opens up with like someone on the Bebop scrolling through TV channels. First of all, a really great way to do world building. But for me, the biggest takeaway that I had from this episode was more like they kind of have this conversation with the cult leader about how television has created religion because it controls people through fantasy. And that's kind of like the cult leader's like philosophy is like, oh, like people are so just like
easily
brainwashed
swayed.
by things that they see on television. And it's interesting because this show came out before social media, before the internet. And I just felt like it was really poignant for them to kind of make that parallel with, you know, being brainwashed and feel like you can escape into a fantastical world through digital media. And I felt like that's still resonant in our own society. And yeah, I don't know. I just kind of like, for some reason, this episode made me feel really like unsettled.
At the end, you find out that the cult leader was this boy who...
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was it was because of a medical accident that he was rendered a vegetable state.
Yes.
And, you know, they say all he could do was dream. So he dreamed of a religion in which he could upload his brain into the media system, I don't know, like whatever dimension, and like manipulate people that way. And like you see that, you know, that is a very childlike propensity to do. Like you feel like you're different from everybody else. You have this thing that is so integral to what living the good life is that you don't have, and that makes you a pariah. And so that desire to make it so that because I have to suffer, everybody else has to
Everyone
suffer.
else has to suffer. Yeah.
And I'm gonna do this in like this like manipulative way, like that's separate, but this base raw feeling of being different, and because of that, you want everybody to be the same as you. That is just so heartbreaking, because it's like the people of this world make people like that feel that way. Do you know what I'm saying? And a lot of the times, that is justification for them doing terrible things. It's because they feel like there is a sense of justice achieved by this terrible thing that you've imposed onto me, and so I can do this to you. How do you just fix the good life that is always portrayed all around you? You can't just fix media. You can't fix the world, right?
Okay, so for our next segment here on the pod, we like to do a Bechdel test. it's a way to kind of analyze and look at the quality of female representation in any given piece of media. And it was devised by a cartoonist named Alison Bechdel. And we like to use it here on the pod because it's super easy breezy. There are 3 questions. Number 1, are there at least 2 named female characters? Number 2, do they speak to each other? And number 3, do they speak to each other about something other than a male love interest? So,
Ding, 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 ding.
ding, ding.
Yes.
Cowboy Bebop definitely passes. And let's start with Faye, I guess.
Best girl Faye.
Yeah, we already talked so much about
in
her.
the palm of our hands. Yeah, we talk so much about her. But I guess we can talk about her role as the primary female character on the main cast.
Yeah.
Because you could say that Ed is part of the main cast, but she doesn't play a big role in the storytelling or the plot development, at least. I think she fills up her role great. I think that there are certain stories that only female characters can tell.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think that she tells them and portrays them in a way that is realistic, that is interesting.
Particularly in the context of like youth and beauty and like, I don't know. I think there was just something about her story that it would not have been the same had she been a male character.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess I can't really pinpoint what it is about her, but she seems to be like really conscious of her, like, I mean, in the present day, like she's really conscious about her femininity, and she kind of like weaponizes it as an adult. Whereas like when we see her as a kid, it's just like, you know, she's a lot more like less conscious about that. So it's, I think there's a lot of like emotional complexity to Faye's character that really comes through because she is a female character trying to like navigate this world by herself, like completely by herself.
This world of violence, of betrayal, and just like tragedy. Only she could really use her sexuality to get what she wants, like in this world. And she's aware of that, and she doesn't shy away from that, and because she recognizes that as something she has, another thing that she has, and she just has to use it to survive.
All right, so Julia.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on her.
You know what? Me too. Well, why don't you start? Here, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think number 1, right off the bat, my thing with Julia is, and we've talked about this before in like other episodes.
I can already see where this is going.
She already knows. Like we should get a bingo card for our podcast, like things that we say in every single episode. Like, tick that one off. And it's always in regards to female characters being like not really their own person, and just being like a plot device, or like being just a part of a male character's character arc. And I think that's very much the case with Julia. And you know what? It's fine for me. I'm like over it because she's like, Spike is the main character. And she is really just there for Spike, and I'm not going to like knock it just solely on that fact, because she does play a role that's like valuable to his character. So I'm not going to say anything about that, but I do see it. I do be seeing it. Secondly, when Jet asks Faye, like Faye gets back to the ship and Jet asks her what kind of woman was Julia, and Faye says she was a normal one. I think what I really appreciated about it was that oftentimes I feel like love interests can end up being, especially when it's like, ooh, the woman in his life type characters, like they can often end up being seen as like manic pixie dream girls, or like just like very kind of extraordinary type women, you know?
She's not like other girls.
She's not like
right?
other girls.
Yeah.
Her importance, her value in Spike's life, or the value to the show is the importance to which, like, or I guess the value to which Spike attributes to her. It kind of humanizes Spike a little bit, but it also speaks to like how relationships are complicated and there's like a lot of things that like we aren't privy to.
Her being used as a plot device to give Spike motivation, I literally wrote, LOL, Kris is gonna go off. Because, like, when I watched the scene of her getting shot on the rooftop and Spike runs to her, picks her up, and he's like, no! You know, I was like, Kristen's gonna get you for that. The fact that on multiple occasions, the name Julia comes up and Spike is like, all right, I'm gonna go, and then everybody else is like, wait, what if this is like is a different Julia? Because it could be like anyone, right? You could be leaving the ship and risking your life for like any random woman named Julia. And so they really make this point of saying like, Julia's nobody special, guys. Don't think she's anybody special. Her name isn't anything special. We don't understand why Spike is so drawn towards this woman. Even though at first I was a little skeptical as well about Julia's character in that she seemed so shallow, one-dimensional, we don't know anything about her. But if you think about it, nobody does except Spike. And nobody on the Bebop knows anything about her. They don't get to know her, right? And Spike has this whole history that we never find out. Like, it's not even like a plot detail that is revealed later. Right? Like, it's like, we know about this woman. We know that she's his entire motivation, but we don't know anything more until the bitter end.
This show doesn't even really go into who she is or like what was she doing in the crime syndicate. It's literally all just, she was a woman who existed in Spike's life. Just trust us. She's important.
It's fine that it's fine that they do that. It's just the concern arises when it's a trend, right? Like not every single, but so many series after series after series use that that it becomes concerning. So even though it's not in and of itself problematic at all, it's fine to use her that way. It's just a shame to see that repeated over and over again. Welcome to Dumpster Fire, our favorite segment where we lose all brain cells. Typically, this is the part of the episode where, you know, we have just spent all this time talking about the show and all its good stuff, all its bad stuff, and then we can finally just use this time to talk about whatever we want. We're tired. We don't know what's going on. But today, we're looking a little fresh. I wonder why.
We should address the elephant in the room. Now, if you're listening to this right now, this doesn't affect you. However, if you are watching this on YouTube and you're like, looks like a different day, that's because it is a different day.
It is.
We actually recorded this episode, the episode that you've been listening to up until this point, about a week ago. And then we got off the call and we were like, we just lied straight through our teeth. For some reason, both of us were trying to hold it together. I don't know why we were pretending to be like, yes, we're just here for the... We're just intellectuals.
Through and through. There's no simp energy in this episode. Not this time.
Okay.
Oh boy, did we lie.
In my defense, and in your defense, because we telepathically had this thought without ever having discussed it, we felt like this episode, for some reason, we had to pretend to have our like brain cells together. But yeah, we were
and then literally midway through the week, we were like, something feels wrong. So we decided to re-record Dumpster Fire.
We're like, we're not being honest with our audience.
Let's just talk. Okay, so, you know, to start off on a note that we were talking about last week, we talked a lot about the music, right? We can't talk about the show without talking about the music.
Agreed.
So, yeah, for me, the music is such an iconic part of this show because I think we talked about this before in the way that when the producers and the creators of a show put a lot of care into their music, That's when you can tell that they've put a lot of care into the show.
It almost felt like every episode had a new song in it. Like, it was obviously Tank, the opening, is iconic in and of itself. But I was really impressed at just how many sort of different like subgenres of jazz they kind of weaved in and out of throughout through every episode. And Yoko Kanno she also scored another anime called Kids on the Slope, it's literally an anime about jazz. These like high school students who are, interested in jazz music in, I think, like 1960s Japan. And I watched that in high school, and that was actually the show, like the thing that got me into jazz music.
Dang.
I found it through anime, and I feel like a lot of young people have, because there is a lot of jazz influence in the Japanese music scene. And so there are a lot of examples of pieces of media in Japan that really heavily draw from jazz.
Yeah, we played Tank for our high school jazz band.
Yeah.
So it's got an emotional place, a sentimental place in my heart. I was on keys, but I always sucked. I hated improv so hard.
You're great.
Thank you. But I was just going to say, I think the intro in part is so famous and iconic because jazz just produces a different type of hype. When I think of hype intros, I think, first thing that comes to mind is like Haikyuu and Attack on Titan intros, right? Like very anthem-like.
Yeah.
But when you think of Tank, like, it's a different type of hype. It's like increasing tempo constantly. It gets your heart rate pumping. It gets you excited to watch, no matter what kind of episode it's going to be. And I, for one, I don't think I skipped the intro. I usually do, to be honest. I never skipped this intro for this show. Is there anything else we want to talk about?
Nope, that's the end of Dumpster Fire. Bye, guys. Okay. We went through We went through the whole trouble of re-recording this segment. So let's just get on with it, ma'am.
Okay. Who's gonna say it first?
I said it first last time.
Spike Spiegel's the perfect man.
Okay, let me tell you how this whole thing started. So basically, in the original Dumpster Fire, I was like, the voice acting is so good in this show.
Yeah, it is.
And it is really good. And I was saying how Emily watched it in Japanese. I watched it half and half. The reason that the English dub is so good, I think, is that I felt like both the Japanese voices and the English voice acting was able to capture the same like aspects of these characters' personalities. And I was specifically referencing Spike's English voice and how I really liked it. That's the one that I remember more. And I was kind of saying how like Spike has a good voice, okay? And then you were saying that he also had a good voice, and we were like,
yeah. Yeah, we were saying how the voice actors do this thing where they speak with like a drawl so that it sounds very laid back, and we said it sounded very flirty. And you and I were like, yeah, it sounds very flirty, like in the super scientific way. Like, yes, very flirty. Let's move on.
It contributes so much to their character.
It was the shirtlessness for me, but yeah, that's okay too.
Oh my god, yeah. I feel like, actually, I'm not gonna say it.
No, we literally re-recorded for this.
No, it's okay. It's not even not safe for work, but like, I was saying how like Spike is just like gritty 90s Deku. Like, he's built like a broccoli. Yeah. He's built exactly like a broccoli.
For me, I didn't start simping. I don't think I simped for him like the entire episode. I think for some reason.
You mean show?
It's the same. Yeah, the show. Sorry. Yeah. It's the same reason, I think, why we felt so compelled last week to talk about this show purely academically. The whole show, I was like, yes, yeah, covering my eyes.
Spike comes on shirtless, you're like, yeah? Oh, sorry, if you're listening to it, you can't see, but we're covering our eyes. We're covering our eyes right now. again, just like with something like Cowboy Bebop, because it does have this iconic status and there is so much intellectual discourse about this show.
There is.
That we wanted to be able to contribute in that vein. But listen, Spike is an attractive man. And that's all I'm going to say because my mom listens to this podcast. So that's all I can say.
I'm kind of upset that he, who is arguably the most interesting character, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, arguably one of the most interesting characters. And
in the show or
like,
in anime?
In the show. Mm-hmm. And he's like his whole motivation for the first half or for most of the show is this like one-dimensional female character. Or maybe I'm just jealous, but Julia is not worth his time.
Does dumpster fire happen after Bechdel test? It does, right? Okay, so you guys have listened to our Bechdel test already. Why are we ragging on Julia so hard? Like, we were literally being like, she's so one-dimensional. And like, why? Like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but like, why is Spike obsessed with her? Some of our gripes with Julia were personal vendettas.
That we were jealous. Jealousy is an ugly emotion.
Jealousy is an ugly emotion, and we are not here for that girl-on-girl hate, okay? The point of our podcast is to uplift women, not to get possessive over men.
Okay, wait, Kris. Yeah. Why do you like him so much? Is it just the physical
I did not even explain. I don't know, to be honest. I think that, like, he's just very much in that archetype of characters where it's just, like, he's kind of just really cool, calm, and collected, and also very competent, but he has like a certain like charisma to his character as well. And I think those types of characters, you know, they're written to be like I don't know, attractive, or because you want your audience to like them, right? So I don't know, I think it's just the aesthetic of that character that on its surface is like fun to watch.
So you like tsundere characters, I see.
I actually do. Oh my god, I actually do. There's a trend. Oh my god, there's a trend.
You know what? That's
I would
true.
say the only exception to that is I am a big Naruto fan, but I don't like Sasuke. And he's like the poster boy for like broody bad boy anime characters, and I don't really like Sasuke. But that's the only exception.
But that's because Sasuke has a lot of... Okay, this ain't gonna turn into a Naruto analysis. But that's because Sasuke has a lot of like deep character flaws. But with Spike, it's like he never gets to the point where he's a hindrance to people or it becomes annoying in any way. In fact, like you could actually point to a lot of character traits in Spike that are very admirable. Like he like cares about his crewmates or, you know, stuff like that.
Or stuff like that. He doesn't care about me, but when he like walks away from Faye during the finale, I was like, that just felt like a stab in the heart, because I like felt so bad for her,
like,
and I was
you
like,
were Faye.
I thought you cared about her. I was Faye in that moment.
Did you ship the two of them at all any time throughout the show?
Oh, that's a good question. We actually didn't talk about that. I didn't feel any overt romance between them. Like, I think the interactions that could come across as flirty are more like they're written so that you could see them as flirty if you wanted to, but you could also just be like, that's just how they interact as people. Spike and Faye are very similar, and obviously if they were talking to someone that's very similar to them, that is how they would talk, just being very I don't know, like snarky and trying to get under each other's skin. And I feel like the reason that a lot of people might read that as romantic is because, I don't know, it's that whole like enemies to lovers, like the popularization of that trope is people read those kinds of exchanges very often as romantic tension.
I thought that there was going to be something going on, to be honest, because I think that they... out of the most of the characters, they're like the young ones. They're like super hot, you know, like they're both portrayed in a way that's very appealing to the eyes. And so I think that
just say they're good looking.
Shut up. Let me find synonyms. Okay.
No, I get it. Yeah.
but but I think that it's, you know, I liked that they didn't end up together, because I like when writers subvert the trope of, oh, the two most good-looking characters in a show have to end up together, because that's what love is all about. If you're good-looking, then you end up together. And I think that I low-key think that is kind of what drives the Zuko Katara ship too, that we, you know.
No, we're talking about Zutara in this episode. I don't even hate Zutara as a ship. I mostly hate just like how much people use it as a way to discredit Aang's character. That's what I don't like.
I see.
The ship in and of itself, I don't actually mind that much. But yeah, for Spike and Faye, I also feel like it wouldn't even, if you think about it, it wouldn't even fit their characters for them to ever have a romance, because you know that neither one of them would want to say anything if they did have feelings for each other. They would never say it. And especially within the context of those 26 episodes, like, it just wouldn't really fit. Like, if the show was longer, maybe.
Anything else to bring up?
Nope, that's it. I think we should exit this dumpster fire before it gets a little...
Honestly, I think that
weird,
it was really mature of us to be honest with everybody. I think that this is a great development for our character, and I think we're growing.
All right, we're done. All right, thank you for listening to this dumpster fire, and back to the main episode.
We also have to rate the show.
Shoot, yeah. Oh, okay, that's the last thing we have to do. All right, rating.
Yes. So I would give this show 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Rotten lobsters that
oh my God, yes.
go through your vents. Okay, I would give this show 5 out of 5. Not because of some nostalgia influencing my vision.
Yes. Yeah.
Or, you know, not because of some emotional attachment or anything. I just think this show is straight up amazing. Like, on its face, right? Take it at face value. Yeah. I think it's amazing. I think it does so many things well. And the things that it brings to the table is so unique that, I don't know, I'm willing to overlook those other things and deem it as the perfect show. Because I am a sucker for stylish things. Like, I think it's so cool. It creates such a niche for itself.
Yeah.
And going back to what you said at the beginning, the fact that nothing else was quite able to capture that feeling, that same atmosphere, that same story is, I think, in and of itself a testament to what this show is able to accomplish.
So the rating that I'm going to give it is 5. I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 bonsai trees, because I think Jet really took care of his bonsai trees throughout the show. And
they hardly got any mention today, so glad you
and when I first finished it, I was like, it's going to be a 4.5, because I felt like the ending was, I shouldn't say wasn't justified, but I felt like the ending was setting itself up for a more hopeful, more sincere message about moving on from things that have been plaguing you for so long. And I felt like it didn't take that route. But then upon further reflection, as I mentioned, I have decided that that is just a personal choice. And that the ending that they chose is valid. You know, what did the authors or what did the writers set out to do, and did they do it? And I think what they set out to do was amazing and hard, and they did it.
Oh, so difficult. Oh my gosh.
And they were able to create a show that, like I said, feels super timeless, and how we can sit here and give it a 5 out of 5 without nostalgia or, you know, without kind of, and going in with really high expectations and still coming out really impressed.
Super satisfied.
It's just across the board a really great show. So I can't justify not giving it a 5.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for making it this far. We know it's always difficult, but I hope that today was a little less difficult because we were a little bit more coherent. But thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts from: Spotify, Apple, Google, or YouTube at The Workshop. You can also find us on Twitter at Into The Workshop. Any last words, Kristen?
Why did you say it so threateningly? Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in our next episode.
Yes. Bye.
Goodbye.